Hi everyone, and welcome to the Real Talk podcast, hosted by me, Daisy Gideon. As an award-winning journalist and filmmaker with more than 4 decades of experience globally, but now based in apparently one of the most dangerous cities in the world, Beirut, I decided that the perception of the world was wrong about Lebanon and Beirut, and took it upon myself to prove that fact by introducing you to real people with real stories through my Real Talk podcast. So expect to be surprised, illuminated, entertained and educated about Lebanon and the Middle East through this series. Every episode will take you on a journey into the homes, heartland and highlights of a diverse range of people, from locals to foreigners and artists to activists, and unearth the timeless secrets and stifling syndromes that keep this once jewel of the Middle East paralysed, whilst at the same time untamed and unashamed. So thank you for joining me, and 1,000 blessings to those who also support me through your generous donations. It is only through the assistance of people like you, who expect the media to provide a level playing field, an unbiased discourse, a free and fair point of view, that my team and I are able to continue to seek the truth, produce these reports and share them with you. So click on the donate button below and send whatever you can afford to help keep those stories coming. And please remember to follow me on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and all my social media platforms. And if you like the podcast, then please tell your friends about Real Talk or share the link. Wouldn't the world be an amazing place if we all amused ourselves with more of the truth and less of the propaganda? I think so. Thank you for your faith and support. Today we're in the home of retired General Maachar. Thank you very much for inviting us to your home. We're having a conversation today about both two topics: firstly, the Lebanese armed forces, and secondly, the imminent threat of war upon Lebanon based on the ongoing war in the south between Hezbollah and Israel, which is affecting Lebanon very seriously. And I'd just like to introduce you and explain your background. You joined the army in 1983 and then retired in 2012, serving 29 years, reaching the position and rank of general. And your last post was commander of the Riyadh Air Force Base.
Correct.
You have a political science degree, a master's in strategic studies. I'd like, if you don't mind, just to give us more understanding of those other areas of expertise and why we're sitting here today talking to you.
All right. First, you are most welcome, and thank you for your intent or interest in hearing a point of view of a Lebanese Armed Forces General, retired general. With a Bachelor in Political Science and the Master in Strategic Studies, I decided to move into the area where you can use your expertise in pursuing ways to de-escalate conflict resolution and peace and stability in the region. And also I worked in the defense and news media, and I was general manager of a news and defense agency. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I was more close to assessing the current and ongoing struggle in the Middle East and the conflict between Arab and Israelis in that matter.
Mm-hmm. And is that what you're doing right now?
Now I'm the chairman of the Loyalty to the Nation Center for Research and Study. Mm-hmm. So we are concerned on making studies on what are the Lebanese national interests, how to determine risks and that threatens and affects those national interests, and everything related to war and peace and stability and security and all of that issues.
Which is really relevant right now. So
Correct.
You're in the right post, and
Correct.
This is a very apt conversation for us to be having. I'm going to start with the readiness of the Lebanese Army for a major conflict, because that's the state we're in right now. Just as a background and introduction, what we can see or what we know is that Lebanon has been enduring an economic crisis for the last 4 years, which has been described by the World Bank as one of the worst any nation has experienced in more than 150 years. The impact has not only hit the entire population, but more profoundly also the Lebanese armed forces, and impacted their readiness for armed combat, as well as the retired servicemen and women. It's gone beyond those serving to extended to the many, many thousands of those who are retired. This group of people, and I've witnessed it myself living in Lebanon now for the last 2.5 years, witnessed protest after protest by these retired men and women who've been demanding their rights because their salaries have been and stipends have been severely impacted because of the economic crisis and also the mismanagement of the Lebanese government in all of its economic affairs. So what I want to start with, and what my understanding is from talking to a lot of these people, is that for some people during the last few years, some soldiers have received as low as $40 a month a salary, moving from $800 down to $40. And it's quite incomprehensible for any of us to understand how anyone can live, especially those with families. And this has resulted to many of them leaving the army, resigning, abandoning, and also migrating overseas. So we've seen a real shrink and impact on Lebanon's armed forces at a time where it can't afford to have that. With Israel breathing fire down Lebanon's throat right now, determined to wreak havoc across the country, the economic hardship of those serving has compromised Lebanon and its armed forces at a time, as I said, when it could be needed the most. So this focus brings us to the topic of the Lebanese armed forces. Let's start with some basic information. How many people are serving in the Lebanese armed forces now, to your knowledge?
We can say that more than 70,000 armed forces do serve in the army right now. Mm-hmm. And that's true. We have seen some form of early retirement or soldier asking for early resignation or fleeing the army or deserting the army. But as far as what's going on, this number is still marginal compared to the 70,000 armed forces. Also, the Lebanese Army is still recruiting personnel to recover this loss of number, which didn't exceed 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers.
So tell me, how has that impacted their lives, as, the people in the armed services?
The economic crisis had deep impact on all Lebanese citizens, and especially on the armed forces. The salaries itself has diminished around 90% of their initial values before the crisis. And not only that, is also the rise in the cost of the food and all the goods. And also the increase in the taxes and fees imposed by the government is being paid at 89,000, where the salaries are still at the 1,500. So there is no balance between what the soldier gets as paycheck every month and the amount of obligation he has to pay for electricity, for water, for all of that, for school and education and healthcare. So there is no balance between what he earns and what he needs to pay. This has caused a lot of soldiers to go and seek another employment. The army command knows that those soldiers are seeking another job, which constitute a question mark on how much the army would be ready to deploy or mobilize all soldiers at a certain time.
I want to clarify a few things to people, because you mentioned the 1,500 versus the 89,500. To people who don't understand what that is, it's a depreciation of the Lebanese lira.
Yes.
So once it was $1 equaled 1,500 Lebanese lira, but now it's dropped to 89,500.
Correct.
So what they're paying for, what they're getting paid by, or what it costs them to buy things, it's being charged at a much higher rate compared to what they're actually receiving in their pocket. So correct. You mentioned a 90% reduction in their salaries. Let's look at the average salary of an officer and the average salary of a soldier. What were they and what are they today?
let's say if an average soldier get $1,000 per month before the economic crisis, now he's getting $150 to $200, which is not considered the minimum wage required to ensure living in a dignifying situation.
Yes.
And for officers, they used to get paid around $4,200 previous to the economic crisis. Now they're getting 400 to 600, which is also is not good enough to maintain a dignifying way of life.
And that has impacted retired servicemen and women as well.
It has impacted the whole country. All citizens are living this kind of crisis, and especially the armed forces and the retiree, where the government should adopt reform policies to make a recovery for the economy, so the Lebanese currency would regain its value, so would have a significant impact on individual salaries for all army, active soldier, and retiree.
We won't get into that political debate, but we know that basically Lebanon is in a hold position and has been for about 4 years with regards to the government not making any real reform decisions or taking strong action, despite the people protesting, complaining, suffering on a massive level. But let's steer away from that and stick to these questions. You mentioned also the fact that soldiers, the army is very well aware that soldiers are having to take up a second or a third job in order to feed their families. Normally that's prohibited in any country in the world for an enlisted person to be taking on another job because there's a conflict of interest. You then went into impacting the readiness of the army in case of conflict. So these, we'll go into that now. I want to go into what the major factors are that are impacting the readiness in more detail of the Lebanese army. What are those factors?
The economic crisis has impacted the whole readiness of the army as far as the personnel. Like we said, that people are leaving the army. The army needs to recruit more personnel to maintain the readiness. We need spare parts. We need to ensure that the food and the fuel and the healthcare system is available to sustain the support for those armed forces. And also we need the ammunition and the upgrade of the army capability, military capability. So we're facing multi-level setback in those capabilities. And when you talk about the readiness and the efficiency of the soldier to fight and conduct successful military mission, you need to have the multiplication of 4 factors: the doctrine, training, equipment, and the morale. And we wouldn't be able to assess those 4 factors unless we are under critical emergency situation. And at that time, you would be able to know exactly if we are ready to conduct successful mission, or we might fail because of the lack of equipment, readiness of the equipment, or the readiness of the personnel. I would say that on a training level, the army has done its best to well train, to prepare the soldier to conduct the fight, and they are ready to do the fight, and they are committed to do the fight against Israel or against any aggression that might threaten the national interest. But you cannot send a soldier to do the fight without the logistic support, or not taking care of the morale for him to be fully ready to conclude a successful military operation.
And do you think morale is the biggest issue right now?
Of course. This is one of the main aspects of when you train a soldier. You need to have him ready to go and commit the act of warfare, not to think about his family and about the food and milk and how to feed his family. You have to have him this taken care of and let him concentrate on his warfare, and he's a fighting machine when he's now in a position that only his concern are about how to bring enough food or enough money or income to sustain his family. We are living at an awkward situation, and in that context, the Lebanese army is trying to do its best to alleviate this situation by providing some kind of support or financial aid to the soldier.
Talking about funding the army, who funds the army? Besides the Lebanese government, especially now we know that it's been bankrupt for a few years. There is military aid that's been provided by other countries, in particular America and Britain. America has provided like $1.28 billion in financial support from 2006 to 2018. And there's some money that was sent last year, 72 million, to support the army. And Britain has sent much less, maybe 100 million pounds, English pounds, in the same sort of period.
Basically, the funding comes from the Ministry of Defense budget. And all the budget allocated within the defense budget is going to cover the salaries and daily operation and some for the fuel and the food system. There is a huge need or deficit in the Ministry of Defense budget to cover all mission required. But as you said, there is a lot of countries, not only the United States. The United States and Qatar and Arab nation are supporting Lebanon. I don't want to list countries, not to omit anyone, but because there is an international effort to support the Lebanese army. It's demonstration on their understanding of the key role of the Lebanese Armed Forces institution as an institution that transcends sectarian boundaries and remain a key player in the ongoing security and stability in the region and in Lebanon.
And there is an ongoing debate about should only the armed forces be the ones defending Lebanon. In the country, it's been going on for years. Why Hezbollah still bears arms, and the country is split over this. Well, it's probably not evenly split, but the argument and the debate over why there is a militia that still, carries arms, and should Hezbollah be disbanded? Shouldn't they be supporting the Lebanese army more strongly to be able to strengthen, empower the Lebanese army so that it can be the only force in Lebanon defending this country? What is your take on all of that?
The Lebanese army should be the sole defender of Lebanese sovereignty and integrity and stability. This is by the constitution and by the consent of all parties. But we are in state of war. We have an ongoing aggression from Israel. We have an occupation of Israel of some part of Lebanese territory. We have a continuous violation of Lebanese sovereignty and either in territory and maritime or aerial invasion, or not invasion, it's violation of Lebanese territory. So we are in state of war, and all consecutive government since the Taif agreement and since the adoption of the Taif agreement, all national government has recognized the right of the Lebanese people to resist the Israeli occupation and to defend the Lebanese country against this occupation and do its best to liberate Lebanese territory. We have seen in 2000 where we have seen that Israel unconditionally withdrawn from certain part of the southern Lebanon. Now to come to the question why international community doesn't do the proper effort to provide Lebanese army with the proper armament to be able to maintain and defend the country. This is the question to be addressed to those nations. On our behalf, we are ready to fight, we are willing to fight, and we are committed to fight any aggression against Israel.
We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast and just wanted to remind you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you believe our work is worthy, then please support independent journalism and free speech by clicking on the button below and giving whatever you can afford. Thanks again. Now let's get back to the podcast. Let's move on to the second topic, the threat of imminent war. So just to set the scene, it's possibly the most anticipated war for the past 6 months. Will there be a rematch between the hardened, committed, ground-savvy guerrillas of Hezbollah and the far superior military force of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces? These two enemies, we all know, last fought it out in 2006 during the July War, or the Second Lebanon War as Israel calls it. 34 days of Israeli bombardment and battles across the full breadth and width of the country after Hezbollah fighters kidnapped 2 soldiers on the southern border. Instead of a contained response, what we saw was Israel took revenge on the entire nation, sending the entire population into chaos and the country almost back to the Dark Ages, hitting utilities, bridges, roads, airport, and sending people into fear and mayhem. Israeli forces penetrated deep into Lebanon, not reaching Beirut, but were held back, thwarted by Hezbollah guerrillas who knew the terrain, defied and defeated the Israelis. I'm just calling it as I saw it. I was very involved, although I was living in Australia. We were very active with the government in Australia to bring this atrocious and violent response to an end. In the end, Israel was forced to retreat. The world rose in condemnation. It was a tragedy for Lebanon. What we're going to focus on now is the probability of a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah again, and bringing Lebanon to its knees even further than we already are. Everyone has said for the last 10 months, Lebanon doesn't need another war. It can't afford another war. The economy and the people are devastated. So everyone's been trying to avert war. We've seen a lot of diplomatic missions around the world, back and forth. Hochstein is here one day, Antony Blinken, Josep Bicep from the EU. You've got people coming and going, but we're still on the brink of war. So my first question is, as an expert, and I'd like it to come from you, explaining to the audience just a summary of who Hezbollah is, where they came from, why they exist today, if you don't mind.
Hezbollah was created in 1982 by the Iran Revolutionary Guard. And the main intent was to oppose the Israeli invasion to Lebanon in 1982. And since then, they have committed themselves to defend Lebanese territory against Israeli occupation, and they were successful in 2000 in forcing Israel to withdraw from Lebanon, southern Lebanon, in unconditional withdrawal. Hezbollah has transitioned also from being a military group into a political group, and is now considered part of the Lebanese government and Lebanese community. They have been for, let's say, almost 30 years fighting against Israeli occupation. And so far they were successful sometimes, and sometimes they were not. And for instance, in 2006, they were successful in liberating the Lebanese detainee in Israel, but at a high cost, where we have seen a huge destruction of southern Lebanon and some of the area in Lebanon.
Can I just explain that? So that 2006 incursion and kidnapping those 2 Israeli soldiers, it was really to have some sort of leverage to negotiate the release of Lebanese detainees yes. in Israeli prisons.
We have to see Hezbollah in the overall context of the fight between Lebanon and Israel and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And now, if we never touch the basis on the root causes of what is causing all that confrontation, we're going to see every decade a new Islamic or terrorist group or whatever they call the Western world, and versus the Arab world would call it a resistance group. They will be fighting, ready to fight for the right of the people to determine their own fate. It's an obligation for the international community to pressure all parties to sit down on the table to come for a long-lasting peace process and a long-term solution for the conflict causes.
You mentioned the root causes. Tell us what you believe the root causes are.
The root causes are that Israel has occupied Arab territory, refused to withdraw from those territory, conduct military operation all over the region, in Lebanon, in Syria, and everywhere, and also refused to give the right to the Palestinian people to have their own state with their own capital. And this has been going on for decades. Israel has been committing war crimes, atrocities, violating international law of war, and the last 10 months has been a blunt image on what Israel has been doing for decades, but now in a certain period of time. And now the world has been more aware of the atrocity committed by the military machine of the Israeli armed forces, yet with no clear vision on what might be the political solution. So we are in absurd confrontation, we are in absurd military operation where we don't have, or we haven't seen a real intent from the Israeli leaders that are really willing to go for a peace process. And therefore we can talk about there is a disconnect between the military objective, the military operation, and the political solution, where, as Clausewitz has said, that war is continuation of politics in other means. And we haven't seen any connection between the political objective stated by the Israeli government and the military objective. And I'd like to quote what the Israeli defense minister have said, that the total victory stated by Netanyahu is a nonsense. There is a huge difference in the perception of what would be the political objective stated by the government of Israel and the responsible for conducting the military operation, the defense minister, stating that achieving total victory, and
which means eliminating Hamas.
Total victory, if we're talking about the military terminology, we have 4 levels of victories. We have the tactical victory, we have the operational victory, we have military strategic victory, and we have the total victory. At tactical level, it means that you negate the enemy capability to affect our forces. At the operational level, that means that you have dismantled the enemy system to fight, to be able to conduct the fight. At the strategic military victory, that means you have prevented the enemy from the use of force or threaten us for let's say for more or 5 years. At the strategic level, or at the total victory, or when you say the grand victory, that means you have made a change in the geopolitical system where you reach a long-lasting peace. So right now, Israel is not yet at the operational victory because the Israeli armed forces were not able to dismantle Hamas system. They're still able to conduct raids and attack. The command and control for Hamas is still existing. They are still able to conduct military operation and launch rockets and all of that. So when he's talking about total victory, we know for sure that he's not willing to go for a peace process. He doesn't accept the two-state solution, and he doesn't accept the fact that he needs to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority on what would be the transition from the operational or military victory to a total victory. So there is a disconnect between what he wants to do or what he means to do. So in addition to that, when we talk about, in his mindset, the total victory means the elimination or destruction of Hamas. which will lead to jeopardize the life of the hostages. So he's not willing to go for ceasefire. He's not willing to abide by any resolution issued by the UN Security Council. So therefore, we are at high risk that we're for a continuation of the offensive operation. So when we say now, what would be the right thing to do at the right now, all effort should be exerted toward the end of hostilities so we can move to the long-term solution.
But we know that Israel, as we said, is not interested in that. You know, this is the disconnect globally on this topic. It's like the focus is always on those defending, not the party committing the atrocities.
We need to exert enough pressure on both parties to end the hostility and go for a ceasefire in Gaza. That would definitely affect the situation in Lebanon, where all parties in Lebanon, even Hezbollah, said, I have no interest in going into full-fledged war. All what I'm doing is to support the Palestinian case. So the pressure now is, or the main objective now should be aimed toward the ceasefire. Anyway, all UN security resolution, let's say for 1701, and we should be talking about in Lebanon, everybody has agreed or agrees that 1701 constitute an acceptable framework to resolve the crisis and to resolve the issue in southern Lebanon and with Israel. The 1701 itself, it says, I would state what is in the preamble of the 1701. The international community or the UN Security Council welcome the Lebanese government decision to deploy 15,000 armed forces in South Litani sector and collaborate with the UNIFIL and recognize the intent of Lebanese government to ensure the Lebanese armed forces have enough capability to execute the mission. Second, it says it will affirm the need for a long-term solution along with the ceasefire. And third, determine that the situation in Lebanon would have direct impact on the security and peace and the global security and peace. This is how much is crucial the situation in Lebanon. And all security resolution, they state that we are aware that the situation in Lebanon might lead to threaten the international security and peace. And the first article in the 1701, the UN security called for a cessation of fire from Hezbollah and from Israel at the same time. And the last article, on the 1701, it says that the UN security should work hardly in providing a long-term, comprehensive, just peace process in the Middle East based on UN Resolution 242 and 338 and 1515. So this is the framework of 1701. So now we're back to square one. We need to end the fire, we have ceasefire and the hostility to transition into bringing up all the question about what could be done and how it should be done and when it would be done.
And that's the point of the conversation at the moment, where the Commander-in-Chief of the Lebanese Army is trying to get funding to be able to recruit enough soldiers to be able to deploy, that 15,000 across the southern border and start working towards that end.
Yes.
But it's a difficult situation because there's no funding.
There is a plan provided by Lebanese Armed Forces. It's a five stages plan to recruit around 6,000 soldiers, where right now we have around 4,000 deployed in the southern Litani sector, where by 1701 we need to have 15,000. So the plan is to raise this number up to 10,000, but to achieve this number, you need at least $1 billion. And this $1 billion is 70% of this amount should be allocated to acquire transport vehicles to serve the mission required to patrol in the southern along with the UNIFIL. So it could be divided. I would like to thank you to bringing up this, because this requires the international support from all countries willing to help Lebanese armed forces or Lebanese army to fully implement the 1701 as an acceptable framework, international framework that would lead to de-escalate the tension and it would be a acceptable framework for peace and security in South Lebanon. They need to empower the Lebanese army and provide such support.
Just to clarify too, and I've done quite a bit of looking into 1701 because of the situation. You know, Israel complains and blames Hezbollah for breaking or violating 1701 because it's shooting rockets across the southern border of Lebanon into northern Israel. But we also know, and there was a report that was sent to the United Nations earlier this year by UNIFIL. They've conducted their own studies, and Prime Minister Miati also submitted a report where they stated that Israel has violated 1701 through its violations of Lebanon's airspace and sovereignty more than 32,000 times in this period, and probably done many other things. But even now, you know, we've seen it in the last week or so, breaking the sound barrier, flying its jets and terrorizing the people. This is a daily occurrence for the Lebanese in the south. And I've had the opportunity to meet with UNIFIL and talk to them a couple of years ago too, and it's there's blame on both sides, but the extent of violation from the Israeli side in violating 1701 is far greater than what Hezbollah has done in the last, as you said, 18 years or however long it's been in place. So we need to get that clarity. We need to understand, you know, what's been going on and not just focus on the last 8 months, 10 months. Yes. As you said, we have the framework, it needs to be implemented. People are great at coming up with visions and strategic plans. Executing and implementing is always the hardest.
Enough is enough, and we need to move on into some kind of arrangement that those arrangement itself would constitute a guarantee for security of the people of Israel. When I talk about strategic victory or military victory and total victory, that means at the strategic victory that you have secured that the enemy wouldn't be able to threaten our forces for 5 or 6 years or a decade, which is right now, we see that in every 5 or 10 years, we see that rise of more military power that is willing to launch operation against Israel because it's atrocity and because of what's going, the war crimes. Now, if we're talking about Gaza, all the injured people or the people who has lost their families, their friends, their children, they are ready now to move into
the next batch.
The next level. Those will be the next level fighter or the next decade fighter against it. So, and here I would quote the U.S. Defense Secretary, General Lloyd Austin. And he said, the lesson learned from urban warfare that is not you win urban warfare by protecting civilians. The lesson is you will only win urban warfare by protecting civilians. And what's doing Israel right now, and I quote General Austin, he says that Israel is transforming tactical victory into strategic failure.
And yet today we heard that Antony Blinken has just authorized another US $20 billion in aid to Israel. You know, you can't make any sense of American policy. They say they know everything, and they take the opposite action that they should take. Everything could stop with one stroke of a pen, one word, and it doesn't happen. And this, generally speaking, comes back to why we have every 5 to 10 years another outbreak in Gaza, or, you know, between these Palestinians and the Israelis and other wars around the world, because it's a much bigger issue than human beings. It's about the military weapons industry and the need to sell more weapons and keep that cycle going. That's a topic for another day. We're not going to get into that. Let's get back to Hezbollah. Let's just drive into the impact, though, the last 10 months, the tit for tat, and its impact on Lebanon. We've seen more than 500 people being killed, including Hezbollah fighters, but a significant number of them are civilians. The destruction of the south, the olive groves, the ancient olive groves, the agricultural areas, churches, buildings, and also in the Bekaa, not just the south, but the Bekaa. The use of white phosphorus gas, although it's a violation of war crimes, and they continue to get away with it. The Israelis. What we're trying to understand is, has it been worth it? Hezbollah took that decision to get involved. The country is split over whether that was the right decision. We were in the streets yesterday. We travelled down, interviewed people on the streets across different areas of Beirut and the city. They're split. They understand why and the horrors are being committed in Palestine. Others say it's not our business. We feel remorse and sadness for those suffering in Palestine, the innocent civilians. But we should never have been dragged into this, and Hezbollah's taking a unilateral decision. That is not, it's right to take a unilateral decision. It should be the decision of the government and the Lebanese armed forces. What is your take on all of that?
I would say we are in a state of war, and we are in the midst of potential all-out war. So it wouldn't be right to assess the righteousness of what Hezbollah did. It is the time to mobilize all forces to confront the aggression of Israel, have a national unity, to send a clear message to Israel that if you are going to attack Lebanon, all Lebanese factions are united together to defend the country. There would be a time when question would be raised on what happened during these 10 months have served the Lebanese national interest, how much these actions have served the Palestinian cause itself. And another question on what is the way forward, where we are going. All of us, as political parties, we're all heading toward strengthening Lebanon sovereignty and independence and national unity. The national interest, everything has to serve defending our national interests. Lebanon's independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity is a national interest. The unity of Lebanon, institution and people and territory also is a national interest. The role of Lebanon as a mission where people from different sects can coexist is also a national interest we need to protect and preserve. And also the role of Lebanon as being part of the Arab League and part of the international community is also a national interest. So all of that constitute national interest where all action by all parties should take into consideration what their action would affect and how much they threaten those national interests.
It should be a conversation that is really brought around the table after we've dealt with the imminent threat to the nation.
Correct.
I understand that because, yes, it can only lead to division and fragmenting and weakening the country. It's a waiting game. There's tension. Everyone's trying to, encourage Iran not to escalate and retaliate. The same they're doing with Hezbollah. What is the feeling you're getting? Do you feel from what he said that Hezbollah is intent on retaliating?
Yes, I believe that there would be a retaliation. I would like to say that this waiting, from military perspective, maybe they are waiting for proper circumstances for the military operation to have the success needed to achieve the objective. But on the strategic level, there might be a chance that this way would be used to leverage the possibility of reaching a ceasefire, where if reaching a ceasefire would be considered a success for Hezbollah and Iran itself, when their whole intention was and all their activities for 10 months is to support Hamas and to lead for a ceasefire and come to a negotiation. So if this would help achieving ceasefire, it would be acceptable and should be acceptable by Hezbollah and Iran to not retaliate, not to jeopardize the chances of getting a ceasefire. So that would be acceptable and should be embarrassing or humiliating or intimidation for Hezbollah.
Of course.
For Hezbollah, he might go for a limited action that might not cause a huge retaliation from Israel. So all of this waiting on the strategic level is tied to the possibility of having ceasefire, which is backed by the international effort to convince all parties that a cessation of fire is the best interest of everybody. We need to have a cessation of fire so we can move properly into conducting the proper negotiation where it should lead to a long-term conflict resolution.
But does Netanyahu want a ceasefire? When
No.
Why doesn't he want a ceasefire from your perspective?
He knows for sure that the second he announces his acceptance of ceasefire, that means he's the end of his political career. Where this should be also in the best interest of the people of Israel. They should pressure their government to accept the cessation of fire that should lead to an acceptable peace process. Where now we are seeing that it is led by personal interest and personal gain and political gain, and it's kind of nonsense. Unfortunately, we are now a full all-out war because a person, he needs to maintain the chances of remaining in power. The international world, international community should exert more pressure on all parties, not only on Israel. All parties should come to the table and accept, and even for Hamas, would need to end this absurd confrontation and go for a long-term conflict resolution.
Do you think Hezbollah has ever been a necessary force in Lebanon? And is it a necessary force right now?
I would say having a strong army capable of defending Lebanon's sovereignty and integrity is a necessity. All other forms are the unusual. It's not the normal thing to have. When you say that you need to have resistance, that means the Lebanese army has failed to conduct its obligation to defend the country. So by the fact of accepting that there is a need for resistance, that means you have accepted the fact that the army is unable to do what is meant to do, or the mandate of it. And since I'm an army officer, I see it's my own obligation. I was trained and was ready to conduct a mission to defend the country. We need to enable the Lebanese army to have the full capability to defend the country against all aggression. The Israeli, the terrorist group, and all other factors that might threaten Lebanese territory or national interest.
But right now is not the time for that discussion. We're in
the discussion
in the midst
now
of
is
war.
the cessation of fire. And I would bring now the point that Israel doesn't comply by UN resolution, does not comply by the international law. The UN Security Council Resolution 2735, which said that it calls for cessation of fire. It's three-phase approach, where you have the first phase, you would have exchange of the detainees and hostages. You would have withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated area in Gaza, and also you have access to humanitarian assistance, and also return of all Gazan people to their land. And the second stage would be the continuation of negotiation, and that would lead to the withdrawal of Israeli defense forces from all Gaza. And the third would be the normal reconstruction phase. And this resolution states that the UN Security Council opposes any attempt to have a demographic or territorial change in Gaza, and opposes any change in the size or the shape of the Gazan territory. And it affirmed its intent to support the two-state solution. So we have the framework issued by the UN Security Resolution, and now we call upon all parties, all countries, including the Australian government, to make whatever needed to exert pressure on Israel to abide by this resolution that should constitute a framework for a long-term resolution that would end the fighting in Gaza and would have also impact on the fighting in Lebanon, and everybody would be into the process of de-escalation and diffusion of tension between all parties.
Final question on Lebanon. It's been nearly 22 months, 2 years nearly, that Lebanon's been without a president. Do you think if we had a president, Lebanon would still be looking down the barrel of a war with Israel? Would it have made any difference if we had a president?
Of course it would have made a huge difference, because having a president in Lebanon would be active on the diplomatic level and with all allied countries to come to an acceptable framework to diffuse the tension. For instance, in 2006, because of the international effort, along with the effort of Lebanese government and Lebanese president at that time, that led to the end of the war within 33 days. Now we have seen that it's like no one cares. Even in the Arab community, we haven't seen any real effort to exert the proper pressure to come with a unifying position toward what's going on in Gaza. And I would like to bring up now, it's not only a Lebanese president that could make all that change and affect the whole situation. Also, now, the cessation of fire is directly tied to Hamas and Iran. The negotiation is directly tied to Qatar and Egypt. And the long-term solution is directly tied to Saudi Arabia, which should be the main player in convincing all other parties to adopt this long-term solution. Now we haven't seen yet any collaboration among the three parties. And as long as they're not coordinating the end state political solution, we're going to see Israel continuing to use its military might for an absurd war and killing more people and conducting more war crime and more victims and more destruction.
Why aren't these three parties working together? Because they talk like they want peace, they want ceasefire, but if they're not moving in that direction, as you've just stated...
If we had a president in Lebanon, he would have been able to play this role in bringing everybody on the table and saying this is the framework we need to work as Arab nation, along with Iran, along with all international party. This is the path we need to follow. That would be a crucial role that could be played by a Lebanese.
The Prime Minister can't do that? He doesn't have the same clout in the eyes of leaders?
I would put my emphasis on the role of the Lebanese president. He's the role of the president
to do that.
To do that and to lead this effort in the region, on a regional level. But I want to emphasize that electing a new president would be the starting point for resolving many issues, the economic issues, the political issues, and even the international conflict resolution.
But we're no closer to electing a president here as we are close to getting a ceasefire in Gaza.
We are at a historical break point, and they need to come together and understand that we need to push forward electing a president as a starting point for elevating the suffrage of all Lebanese people and put this move forward toward resolving all other issues.
Is there anything else that you might like to comment about or deliver?
I would like to extend our gratitude to the Australian community and Lebanese diaspora in Australia and around the world and tell them that Lebanon needs your affection and your support, and we're gonna still here, and it's not gonna end, but we're gonna still Lebanese after all in whatever it happens.
Yeah, we'll never stop being Lebanese.
Yes.
We've got to keep fighting
Yes.
and trying. True. Thank you very much for this
Thank you.
time. I appreciate the conversation and your openness and candidness talking about this very sensitive topic. Thank you, General.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk and experiencing firsthand the real stories told by real people. I hope you found value and meaning, and encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Your ongoing financial support is vital to our ability to continue delivering these stories, so please remember to click on the donate button in the description, giving only what you can afford. I spent my whole life giving my time, money and skill to serve human rights and social justice causes, and I know it's not easy to keep giving selflessly. But this work is important because the mainstream media has failed to live up to their obligations. So we need to step up, speak up, or we're no better than them. I believe by tuning in to this podcast, you are someone who wants to know the facts and the truth, so you can independently decide what to believe and what not to. My job is to deliver that information. Yours is to place a value on it. Whatever you decide is humbly welcome. Thanks again, and see you on the next episode of Real Talk.